The holographic display bathed Captain Catherine Morgan's face in an ominous red glow as thousands of enemy signatures materialized at the edge of New Eden's solar system. She stood motionless on the bridge of the HMS Defiant, her weathered hands gripping the command rail, until her knuckles turned white. 20 years of naval service hadn't prepared her for this moment. "Tactical, give me numbers," she ordered, her voice carrying the calm authority that had earned her command of Earth's most advanced warship. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, her tactical officer and oldest friend, worked her console with practiced precision. 10,000-plus signatures, Captain. Crystalline configurations match known Zarkak's vessel profiles. They're arranging themselves into their standard attack formation. It's their entire battle fleet. Morgan's steel-gray eyes narrowed as she studied the tactical display. The Zarkak ships moved with unnatural precision, their crystalline forms catching and refracting the light of New Eden's sun. They were beautiful in their geometric perfection, and utterly devoid of humanity's chaos. Status of planetary defense systems. Morgan already knew the answer, but protocol demanded she ask. New Eden's orbital platforms are still under construction, Captain. Communications Officer Martinez reported, his young face tight with concern. Ground-based defenses are at 30% capacity. 3 million civilians, mostly terraforming crews and their families. The weight of those 3 million lives pressed down on Morgan's shoulders. Earth's main fleet was engaged in defending the home system against another Zarkak's assault. The Defiant was all that stood between these crystalline nightmares and humanity's most vulnerable colony. "The collective is broadcasting, Captain," Martinez announced. "Text only, their standard format." Morgan nodded. "Let's hear their demands." The message scrolled across the main view screen in harsh, angular text. "Organic imperfection will be eliminated. Resistance is mathematically futile. Accept extinction with dignity." A bitter smile crossed Morgan's face as she remembered her first encounter with the Zarkaks 5 years ago. They were beings of living crystal who had evolved beyond organic life and now saw it as a corruption to be cleansed from the galaxy. Their ships were extensions of themselves, perfect, crystalline forms that operated with computer-like precision. "They're launching fighter screens," Hayes reported. "Standard grid pattern. They're treating this like a textbook operation." Morgan pushed away from the command rail and walked to the center of the bridge. Her crew watched, waiting for orders, for some miracle strategy that would save them from the impossible odds. "Lieutenant Martinez, patch me through to New Eden Control. Priority channel." The colony's governor appeared on screen, his face ashen. "Captain Morgan, we're seeing the enemy fleet. Our evacuation ships can't launch in time. What are your orders?" Morgan's voice carried steel and thunder. "Governor, there will be no evacuation. The Defiant stands ready to defend New Eden. All I need from you is to keep your people calm and let us do our job." The governor's eyes widened. "Captain, that's impossible. The odds are exactly what we need them to be." Morgan cut him off. "Humanity didn't get to the stars by playing the odds. We got here by breaking them." She closed the channel and turned to her crew. The lights of battle stations cast their faces in harsh relief as they waited for her next words. "The Zarkaks think they know every move we'll make. Their crystal minds calculate probabilities and run combat algorithms that account for every logical response." Morgan's voice filled the bridge with quiet intensity. "But they've made one critical mistake. They brought numbers. We'll bring chaos." She turned to her tactical officer, Commander Hayes. "Initiate Protocol Omega. Shut down all combat AI systems. We're going manual." Hayes' fingers hesitated over her console. "Captain, without AI assistance, our reaction times will be exactly what they don't expect." Morgan finished. "The Zarkaks base their calculations on our standard combat protocols. They expect us to fight smart. Instead, we're going to show them something they've never seen: how dangerous humans can be when we embrace our inner madness." As her crew began powering down the AI systems, Morgan watched the approaching Zarkax fleet. Their formations were perfect, their movements precise. They had no concept of improvisation, of the beautiful chaos that made humanity unique. "Let's show them why they should fear perfection's opposite," Morgan whispered, as the Defiant's human crew prepared to face impossible odds with impossible courage. Warning klaxons fell silent as the Defiant's combat AI systems powered down one by one. The bridge crew watched their high-tech displays flicker and simplify, advanced targeting solutions and prediction models vanishing like morning mist. What remained were the basics: manual helm control, conventional radar, and human instinct. "All AI systems offline, Captain," Hayes reported, her fingers dancing across the simplified tactical display. "We're running on human processing power only. God help us all." Captain Morgan smiled as she watched the Zarkax fleet approach. Their formation was a perfect geometric pattern, each ship positioned with crystalline precision. "Now let me tell you why we're going to win this impossible fight." She pulled up a holographic projection of a Zarkax battle group. The enemy has achieved what they consider perfection. Their ships move in mathematical harmony. Every strategy they employ is calculated to 15 decimal places, and that's exactly why they're going to lose. Lieutenant Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Because they're predictable. Because they're incapable of true innovation," Morgan corrected, expanding the hologram. "They can calculate 1,000,000 possible scenarios, but they can only work with known variables. And right now, we're about to become the most unpredictable variable they've ever encountered." She turned to her helmsman, Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez, a former street racer from the Mars colonies. "Lieutenant, remember those illegal maneuvers you used to pull in the Olympus Mons circuit? The ones that got you arrested 3 times. Rodriguez's eyes lit up with understanding. "The moves that were technically impossible according to standard flight calculations." "Exactly." Morgan's grin turned predatory. "I want you to forget everything they taught you at the academy. Fly like you're 17 again, with the Martian police on your tail and a cargo hold full of contraband." The tension on the bridge broke as scattered laughter rippled through the crew. They were starting to understand their captain's madness. "Tactical, load manual targeting solutions only," Morgan ordered. "I want human eyes and human fingers on every trigger. Engineering, divert all power from the AI cores to our shields and weapons. If we're going to be crazy, we might as well be crazy with extra juice." The Zarkax fleet continued their advance, their formation shifting with mechanical grace. Their first wave of fighters launched, moving in perfect attack patterns that any combat eye would recognize and counter. "Here's what they expect," Morgan explained, watching the enemy approach. "They expect us to engage with standard combat protocols. Their calculations say we'll either attempt a fighting retreat or launch a suicide run. Both scenarios end with our destruction in under 10 minutes." She stepped forward, her voice carrying to every corner of the bridge. "But we're going to show them something their crystalline minds can't process: the beauty of controlled chaos. Lieutenant Rodriguez, plot us a course through that debris field on the edge of the system." Rodriguez studied the field of asteroids and space junk. "Captain, at our current speed, navigating that would be insane, impossible, perfect." Morgan's eyes gleamed. "That's exactly why we're doing it. The Zarkax won't follow us in there because their calculations will tell them it's suicide. And they'll be right. For them." The crew began to understand. By abandoning their advanced systems, they weren't just giving up advantages. They were embracing the uniquely human way of fighting. "They call us imperfect," Morgan continued, watching the enemy ships draw closer. "They see our emotions, our intuition, our ability to embrace chaos as flaws. Today, we're going to show them why humanity's imperfections are our greatest strength." The first wave of Zarkax fighters entered firing range, their crystal forms catching starlight like deadly prisms. "All hands," Morgan's voice rang through the ship's comm system. "We're about to do everything they say is impossible. We're going to think with our guts, not our computers. We're going to fly by instinct, not calculations. And we're going to prove that one ship with a human crew can outfight 10,000 perfect machines. She settled into her command chair as the first enemy shots streaked past the Defiant's bow. Lieutenant Rodriguez, take us in. Show them why they should fear chaos. The Defiant's engines roared to life, and humanity's greatest warship began its dance with death. The asteroid field loomed before them like a graveyard of shattered planets. Lieutenant Rodriguez's hands hovered over the manual controls, her eyes tracking paths that no computer would ever calculate. Behind them, the first wave of Zarkak's fighters moved in perfect formation, their crystalline hulls throwing off rainbow refractions of weapons fire. They're launching a standard pursuit pattern, Hayes reported from Tactical. Three-dimensional grid designed to box us in. Textbook stuff. Captain Morgan leaned forward in her chair. Then let's tear up their textbook. Rodriguez, remember that spiral dive you used to dodge the Mars police? The one that got you that spectacular scar. Rodriguez's hand unconsciously touched the thin white line running along her jaw. The Olympus spiral. Captain, that's suicide in space. The G-forces alone would kill anyone following our exact path, Morgan finished. Which is exactly what their tactical computers will try to do. The helmsman's face split into a feral grin. Aye, Captain. Beginning suicide run. The Defiant plunged into the asteroid field like a needle threading through chaos. Rodriguez's hands danced across the controls, guiding the massive warship through gaps that seemed impossibly small. The first wave of Zarkak's fighters followed, their crystalline forms catching starlight as they maintained their perfect formation. Here we go, Rodriguez whispered, initiating the spiral in 3, 2, 1. The Defiant suddenly rolled, its massive bulk defying physics as it corkscrewed between two massive asteroids. The maneuver would have been impossible with AI assistance. No computer would allow such a dangerous move, but human hands, guided by instinct and experience, threaded the needle. The results were spectacular. The lead Zarkak's fighters, attempting to follow the exact trajectory their computers calculated, shattered against the asteroid's surfaces. Their crystalline forms exploded into clouds of glittering shards, each piece reflecting the destruction of their fellows. First wave down, Hayes called out, unable to hide the excitement in her voice. They're still trying to follow the same pattern. Morgan nodded grimly. Of course they are. Their tactical computers say it's the optimal pursuit course. They literally can't comprehend that we're flying on pure instinct. The Defiant continued its dance through the asteroid field, each movement more impossible than the last. Rodriguez pulled maneuvers that violated half a dozen laws of physics, using the massive rocks as gravity assists and shield walls. The ship's hull scraped against asteroid surfaces, leaving trails of paint in exchange for staying alive. Second wave incoming, Hayes announced. They're adjusting their formation based on the first wave's data, but they're still trying to predict what's unpredictable, Morgan finished. Martinez, patch me through to their command frequency. The young communications officer worked his console. Channel open, Captain. Morgan's voice carried the weight of human defiance as she broadcast to the enemy fleet. To the Zarkak's command, your pursuit algorithms are showing their limitations. Want to see what else humanity can do that your computers say is impossible? She nodded to Rodriguez. Show them the crimson twist. The helmsman's eyes widened. Captain, that's not even technically a real maneuver. It's just something I made up while drunk in a simulator. Exactly. Morgan's smile was dangerous. Do it. The Defiant suddenly reversed thrust, using an asteroid's rotation to sling itself in a physically improbable arc. The move sent them straight through the middle of the second wave of Zarkak's fighters, their point defense weapons firing in patterns that no targeting computer could have calculated. Crystalline ships shattered left and right, their formations breaking apart as they tried to adapt to something their tactical databases had never encountered: pure human improvisation. Third wave breaking off. Hayes reported triumphantly. They're retreating to reorganize their attack patterns. Morgan watched the enemy ships pull back, their perfect formation showing signs of disorder for the first time. They'll be back, but now they know something their computers will never understand. Humanity's greatest weapon isn't our technology. She turned to her crew, pride evident in her eyes. It's our ability to look at the impossible and say, "Watch this." Lieutenant Martinez stared at his communications display, frowning at the unusual pattern scrolling across his screen. The Defiant had earned a brief respite, hiding in the shadow of a massive asteroid while the Zarkax regrouped their forces. But something about their transmission patterns nagged at his trained ear. "Captain," he called out, his fingers dancing across his console. "I'm picking up something strange in the Zarkax fleet's communications." Morgan pushed away from the tactical display where she'd been studying enemy movements. "Define strange, Lieutenant." Martinez plugged an earpiece into his console, his eyes closing in concentration. Before joining the fleet, he'd been a prodigy at the New Earth Conservatory of Music, with perfect pitch and an uncanny ability to recognize patterns in sound. Their ships, they're resonating, not just communicating, but actually vibrating in harmony. His eyes snapped open. "Captain, their entire fleet is basically one massive crystalline orchestra." Morgan crossed to his station in 3 quick strides. "Show me." Martinez transferred the data to the main display, converting the complex frequency patterns into visual wavelengths. The bridge crew watched as intricate patterns emerge, tens of thousands of ships vibrating in perfect mathematical harmony. "It's beautiful," Hayes whispered, momentarily forgetting the deadly nature of their enemy. "Like a symphony written in crystal and mathematics." Rodriguez spoke up from the helm. "That's how they maintain those perfect formations. They're not just networked. They're resonating with each other." Morgan's eyes narrowed as possibilities began to form. "Martinez, what do we have that could disrupt that harmony?" "The sonic mining cannon," Hayes answered before Martinez could speak. "We stripped it from a mining vessel last month, meant to install it at New Eden's asteroid processing facility." "Would it work against their crystal structures?" Morgan asked. Martinez's fingers flew across his console, running calculations. "Maybe, but we'd need their exact resonant frequency. Get it wrong, and we're just making noise. Get it right, and their perfect harmony becomes their perfect weakness." Morgan finished. She turned to Hayes. "How close would we need to get?" The tactical officer grimaced. "Close. Really close. The sonic cannon wasn't designed for ship-to-ship combat. We're talking point-blank range with their main fleet." Silence fell over the bridge as the implications sank in. Point-blank range with 10,000 enemy ships was beyond suicidal. "Show me the approach vectors," Morgan ordered. Hayes brought up a tactical display. The main Zarkax fleet hung in space like a crystalline cloud, their ships arranged in geometric patterns that would have made Euclid weep. Between the Defiant and their formation lay a gauntlet of fighter screens and defensive platforms. "They've adapted to our asteroid field tactics," Hayes reported. "Multiple layers of overlapping fields of fire. No blind spots, no gaps in coverage. They're not taking any more chances with human unpredictability." Morgan studied the display, her mind working through possibilities that no tactical computer would consider valid. "Martinez, how long would you need to analyze their resonant frequency once we're in range?" 3 minutes, minimum. Maybe 5 to be sure. He swallowed hard. "We'd have to stay alive that long." "Captain," Hayes interjected, "even if we get the frequency, the sonic cannon would have to be fired from our ventral hull. We'd be exposing our weakest point to their entire fleet." Morgan nodded slowly, a plan forming that walked the line between genius and madness. "Rodriguez, remember what you said about that reactor core incident on Mars? About riding the shockwave?" The helmsman's eyes widened. "Captain, that was theoretical. I was just running my mouth at a bar. Theory becomes practice when we're desperate enough." Morgan turned to address her entire bridge crew. I won't lie to you. What I'm about to propose is probably the craziest thing any of you will ever hear. Half of you will think it's suicide. The other half will think it's impossible." She smiled, and there was both courage and fear in that expression. "But the Zarkax don't understand crazy or impossible. That's why we're going to win." The crew leaned forward as their captain began to outline a plan that would either save humanity or end in spectacular failure. Either way, they were about to make history. "Emergency power to forward shields." Morgan's voice cut through the chaos as another volley of crystalline projectiles slammed into the Defiant. The bridge shuddered, sparks cascading from ruptured conduits as they pushed deeper into the Zarkax formation. Rodriguez's hands flew across the helm controls, her fingers bleeding from where a shattered display had cut them. "We've lost the port maneuvering thrusters." Switching to backup systems, the massive view screen showed their desperate charge through the enemy fleet. The Defiant's hull was scared and blackened, but they had achieved what the Zarkax considered impossible. They had broken through the outer defensive screens. "Martinez, how much longer?" Morgan demanded, gripping her command chair as another impact rocked the ship. The communications officer worked frantically at his station, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "2 more minutes. I need a stable reading on their resonant frequency." Hayes' tactical station erupted in a shower of sparks. Multiple hull breaches on decks 3 through 7. Damage control teams are sealed off in Section 4. Morgan watched as the crystalline ships surrounding them adjusted their formation, their movements still perfectly synchronized despite the chaos the Defiant had brought to their ranks. They were beautiful and terrifying, like a deadly geometric dance. "Engineering reports the main reactor is running hot," Hayes called out. "We're pushing her beyond safety limits." "The Defiant was built to break limits," Morgan responded, but her voice caught as she saw the casualty reports scrolling across her display. 23 dead, 35 wounded. Names and faces she knew, crew members who had trusted her crazy plan. A massive impact threw several crew members from their stations. Emergency force field generators whined as they struggled to contain multiple hull breaches. "Direct hit to the ventral armor," Hayes shouted. "They're targeting the sonic cannon. They figured out what we're trying to do." Morgan's hands tightened on her chair's armrests. "Rodriguez, give me everything we've got. Take us straight down their throat." The Defiant plunged deeper into the enemy formation, its weapons blazing in desperate defiance. Zarkax ships shattered under their fire, but for each one destroyed, 10 more took its place. 1 minute to frequency lock. Martinez called out, his voice strained as he worked through the cascade of data. The ship lurched violently as another blast struck home. Morgan watched in horror as Hayes' tactical station exploded, throwing her oldest friend across the bridge. She rushed to Hayes' side, cradling her head. "Sarah, stay with me," Morgan whispered, but Hayes' eyes were already growing dim. "Katie." Hayes managed a weak smile. "Make them pay for this. Make them remember why they should fear us." Her eyes closed for the last time as medical teams rushed onto the bridge. Morgan gently laid her friend's body down, tears mixing with the blood and sweat on her face as she returned to her command chair. "Martinez," her voice carried the weight of vengeance. "Tell me you have that frequency." Almost there. His console was smoking, but his bloody fingers never stopped moving. "The harmonics are aligning. Just a few more seconds." The Defiant shuddered as its engines began to fail. Warning klaxons blared as multiple systems approached critical failure. Around them, the Zarkax fleet moved in for the kill, their formations tightening like a crystalline noose. Hull integrity at 20%. Main power failing. "We're losing structural cohesion in the engineering section." The voices of her crew blended with the ship's death throes, but Morgan saw only Hayes' final smile, felt only the weight of her duty to the dead and the living. "All power to the sonic cannon," she commanded. "Rodriguez, point us at their command ship. Martinez, the second you have that frequency, you fire. We've got one shot at this." The Defiant, bleeding atmosphere and trailing debris, turned to face the heart of the enemy fleet. Around them, 10,000 crystal ships moved in perfect, lethal harmony, unaware that their greatest strength was about to become their ultimate weakness. Morgan looked at Hayes' empty station and whispered, "This one's for you, old friend." The Defiance bridge was a nightmare of flickering emergency lights and acrid smoke. Lieutenant Martinez hunched over his console, his fingers dancing across the controls as streams of data flowed across his screen. Blood from his head wound had dried on his face, but his eyes never left the frequency analysis. "Got it," he suddenly shouted, his voice cracking with exhaustion and excitement. "Resonant frequency isolated. Their entire fleet vibrates at exactly 15,783.92 Hz. Captain Morgan leaned forward in her chair, ignoring the pain from her cracked ribs. "Feed it to the sonic cannon." Rodriguez, status. The helmsman's hands were steady on the controls despite the chaos around them. Holding position, but barely. Main engines are at 12%. Maneuvering thrusters running on emergency power. Through the viewport, the crystalline forms of the Zarkax fleet glittered like deadly jewels. They had surrounded the Defiant in a perfect sphere of destruction, their weapons charged and ready to deliver the killing blow. "They're broadcasting, Captain," Martins reported. Text only. The message scrolled across the main screen. "Surrender now. Your chaos cannot defeat perfection. Your death will be mathematically precise." Morgan's lips curved in a grim smile. "Send them Hayes' favorite quote. The one about music." Martinez nodded, understanding immediately. His fingers tapped out the response. "The most beautiful thing about music is that it's the one art form where perfection kills the soul." Sonic cannon charged to maximum. The weapons officer reported from his backup station, his primary console having been destroyed minutes earlier. "But Mime, at this range, the feedback could tear us apart too." Morgan nodded. "Rodriguez, initiate Protocol Delta. Seal all compartments and activate emergency force fields. Everyone, maglock your boots and brace for impact." She opened the ship-wide comm. "All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for extreme sonic distortion. If you've ever been to a rock concert that made your ears bleed, this is going to be worse." The Zarkax ships began to close their formation, their crystal hulls reflecting light in complex patterns. They were preparing for their final attack, unaware that their perfect geometric arrangement was exactly what the humans wanted. "Martinez." Morgan's voice was soft, but carried across the bridge. "You're our maestro now. Make it count." The young lieutenant's fingers hovered over the firing control. His mind, trained in both music and warfare, understood exactly what they were about to attempt. They weren't just going to attack the enemy fleet. They were going to turn their perfect harmony into a symphony of destruction. "Sonic cannon at full power," he reported, targeting their primary resonant frequency. "Adding subsonic harmonics for maximum effect." Morgan gripped her chair. "On my mark." She took one last look at Hayes' empty tactical station. "For Earth, for New Eden, and for everyone we've lost. Fire." The sonic cannon released its invisible wave of destruction. At first, there was no visible effect, just a slight vibration that ran through the Defiance hull. Then the nearest Zarkax ship began to shimmer, its crystalline structure resonating with the precise frequency Martinez had discovered. Cracks appeared in its perfect surface, spreading like lightning through its geometric form. The crystalline vessel didn't explode. It shattered, breaking apart into millions of glittering shards. But that was just the beginning. The Zarkax fleet's greatest strength, their networked consciousness and synchronized movements, became their undoing. As the first ship shattered, its destruction created a harmonic cascade. The frequency rippled through their formation like a wave through a crystal garden. "It's working." Martinez shouted over the deep thrumming that penetrated the ship's hull. "Their network is amplifying the effect. They're trying to distribute the harmonic stress, but they're just spreading the destruction." Morgan watched as ship after ship began to crack and splinter. The Zarkax tried to break formation, but their programming, their very nature, compelled them to maintain their perfect geometric patterns, even as those patterns became their doom. Brace for secondary wave. Rodriguez called out as the destruction approached critical mass. The bridge crew held on as the symphony of destruction reached its crescendo, and space itself seemed to ring with the death song of 10,000 crystal ships. Space bloomed with crystalline death. The Defiance bridge crew watched in awe as the destruction spread through the Zarkax fleet like frost across a window. Each shattering ship cast rainbow refractions across the void, their perfect forms dissolving into clouds of glittering debris. Multiple resonance cascades detected. Martinez called out, his console overwhelmed by the readings. They're trying to dump the harmonic stress through their network, but it's backfiring. Every attempt to distribute the load is creating new failure points. Morgan gripped her chair as the Defiant shuddered under the strain. The sonic weapons backlash threatened to tear their own ship apart, but they had to maintain the attack. Rodriguez, keep us steady. Status of the fleet. 30% of enemy ships destroyed and climbing. Rodriguez reported, fighting the controls as waves of crystalline debris battered their hull. The geometric patterns of their formation are actually accelerating the effect. It's like watching dominoes fall in 3 dimensions. Through the view screen, the destruction painted a terrible and beautiful picture. Zarkax ships fractured and split, each break creating new harmonic waves that rippled through their perfectly arranged squadrons. Their attempts to maintain formation, to preserve their mathematical precision, only hastened their doom. Incoming transmission. Martinez shouted over the deep resonant hum that penetrated the ship's bones. They're trying to negotiate. The message flashed across the main screen, the usual perfect geometric text now fragmented and distorted. Cease attack. Impossibility detected. Chaos factor exceeds calculated parameters. Send them Hayes' other favorite quote. Morgan commanded, a fierce pride burning in her chest. The one about perfection. Martinez's bloody fingers typed out the response. Perfection is not when there is nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. The Zarkax's response came instantly, illogical, contradictory. Human chaos defies. The message cut off as another wave of destruction swept through their fleet. The chain reaction had reached their command ships, their larger crystalline forms creating even more powerful resonance patterns as they shattered. Hull stress reaching critical levels. Engineering's voice crackled through the damaged comm system. The sonic feedback is rattling us apart. Morgan watched as the destruction approached its crescendo. How many ships remaining? Less than 2,000, Rodriguez reported, wonder in her voice. They're still trying to maintain formation even as they're breaking apart. They literally can't comprehend abandoning their perfect patterns. The Defiant superstructure groaned as another wave of sonic energy washed over them. Warning lights flashed across every console as the ship's systems approached their breaking point. Engineering reports multiple deck breaches. A young ensign called from the damage control station. Emergency force fields are failing. Morgan made her decision. Martinez, power down the sonic cannon. Let the chain reaction finish the job. She opened a channel to all decks. All hands, this is the captain. Brace for immediate emergency maneuvers. The sonic weapon fell silent, but the destruction continued. The harmonic cascade had become self-sustaining, each breaking ship adding its own unique frequency to the symphony of destruction. The Zarkax fleet, once a perfect crystalline armada, transformed into a glittering cloud of debris that sparkled like stars born from destruction. Final count, Rodriguez announced as the last echoes of the chain reaction faded. Fewer than 50 enemy ships remaining, all critically damaged. They're retreating, Captain. The bridge crew watched as the surviving Zarkax vessels flood, their once perfect formations shattered both literally and metaphorically. Their retreat was chaotic, disordered. For the first time, they moved like frightened things rather than precise machines. Morgan stood slowly, her injuries protesting the movement. She walked to Hayes' empty tactical station and placed a hand on the darkened console. "We did it, old friend. We showed them that perfection isn't invincible. That humanity's chaos, our beautiful, unpredictable chaos, can shatter any crystal." She turned to her crew, pride shining through her exhaustion. "Send word to New Eden. Tell them that humanity just proved something the Zarkax never understood. Sometimes the most perfect weapon is imperfection itself." The New Eden sun rose over a changed system. Where once there had been empty space, now a new asteroid field glittered with the remnants of 10,000 crystalline ships. The HMS Defiant hung in high orbit, its battle-scarred hull catching the first rays of dawn. Emergency repair crews swarmed over its surface like careful surgeons, sealing breaches and stabilizing damaged systems. On the observation deck, Captain Catherine Morgan stood before the assembled crew. The chamber was packed, with many standing due to their injuries. Every face showed exhaustion, but also pride. They had achieved the impossible, and the cost of that victory was etched into their bodies and souls. The final casualty report came in an hour ago. Morgan began, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "We lost 47 crew members. Their names will be added to the ship's memorial wall, with Commander Sarah Hayes at the top of that list." She paused, letting the weight of their sacrifice settle. "But because of their courage, 3 million colonists are alive. Because they dared to embrace chaos over perfection, humanity has proven something remarkable." She gestured to the viewport, where debris from the Zarkax fleet created rainbow patterns in the sunlight. "The enemy thought they understood us. They calculated every variable, predicted every rational response. But they never understood that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology, or our numbers, or our tactical doctrine." Lieutenant Martinez, his head now properly bandaged, spoke up from his position near the front. "It's our ability to improvise, to do the impossible, because we don't know it's impossible." Morgan nodded. "The Zarkax built their civilization on the pursuit of perfection. They'd made their ships flawless, their formations absolute, their strategies mathematically precise. But in doing so, they forgot something crucial. The universe itself isn't perfect. It's chaotic, unpredictable, beautiful in its imperfection. Just like us." Lieutenant Rodriguez, her hands finally properly treated, managed a tired smile. "They never stood a chance, did they? The moment they decided we were flawed because we embrace chaos. They sealed their own fate," Morgan finished. "Because chaos isn't our weakness. It's our art form." The ship's doctor stepped forward, datapad in hand. "The New Eden medical teams have analyzed the crystalline debris. The Zarkax weren't just using geometric patterns. They were trying to impose mathematical order on reality itself. Their ships were physical representations of their philosophy. And we shattered that philosophy," Morgan said, with a mining tool and a musician's ear. She nodded to Martinez. "Sometimes the most powerful weapons aren't weapons at all. They're tools used in ways nobody expected." A young ensign raised her hand. "Captain, the colonial governor is asking what we'll do if the Zarkax return. They still have other fleets." Morgan's smile held both warmth and steel. "Then we'll show them new kinds of chaos. Humanity has never won its battles by being predictable, by following the expected path. We win because we dare to be different, to be imperfect, to be gloriously, beautifully human." She turned to face the viewport, watching the debris field catch the light. "The Zarkax will tell stories about this battle. They'll analyze it, try to understand it, attempt to calculate where they went wrong. But they'll miss the point because the truth can't be captured in equations. The truth," she continued, "is that humanity's greatest strength is our ability to look at the impossible and say, why not? To take our limitations, our flaws, our chaos, and turn them into victories that no logical being could predict." The observation deck fell silent as the sun fully illuminated the battlefield, turning the crystalline debris into a sea of stars. Each glittering shard represented a piece of the enemy's perfect world, shattered by humanity's beautiful imperfection. Commander Hayes understood that, Morgan said softly. Her last words weren't about victory or duty. They were about making them remember why they should fear us. Not because we're stronger or more numerous, but because we're unpredictable. Because we turn our chaos into art, our desperation into miracles. She faced her crew one final time. Remember this day. Remember that one ship with one brave crew proved that perfection isn't invincible. That chaos, in the hands of those who understand its power, can shatter any crystal. Above New Eden, the debris field continued its eternal dance, a monument to the day humanity's beautiful chaos trumped cold perfection. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't mathematical precision, but the glorious unpredictability of the human spirit.